Joining us live now is Labor MP Julian Hill, Liberal MP Keith Wallahan. Good morning to you both. Julian, I'll start with you. Did you fight hard enough?
Well, I've seen those reports in the 9 newspapers this morning, which obviously you and others are now talking about. The government has calmly, consistently put Australia's view in the interests of jobs and exporters and businesses that in response to President Trump's looming imposition of a global tariff regime that will apply to every country, that Australia should be exempted from that. We've done that on the basis that Australian steel and aluminium supports the US defence industry and creates thousands of good-paying American jobs, and that Australia has long had a trade deficit, or put it in the reverse, that America's long enjoyed a trade surplus.
Not anymore. Well, no, that just changed.
No, that hasn't. These things are measured on an annual basis. I think you'd know that, Keith. There are monthly ups and downs in any trading relationship, but the fact remains that Australia has long enjoyed, or America's long enjoyed a trade surplus with Australia since 1985. We'll continue to put that view. We'll have more to say, but we remain in discussion with the United States administration.
All right, so not giving up hope just yet. I suppose this turns into a China thing where we keep working at it for weeks, months, years. Keith, your response to the news this morning?
It's disappointing. I'm in Parliament to put Australia first, but I also understand the United States has an American first agenda. I think we need to see what actually has happened. We've seen the reports of the decision, but I think that has to actually be formalised. I'm encouraged by the government minister saying they'll double down, but I think it seems like too little, too late. What we need to do is we need to recognise that there are mutual benefits to trade beyond just the security alliances of AUKUS. Yes, the Defence Minister went to the United States and handed over a cheque for AUKUS, but I didn't see much other senior level engagement with the United States, and I think we should have done that more at an industry level. And when you look at our trade with the United States, it's about $100 billion, and this is 1% of that. So it's important, but we need to also learn the lessons from what happened here to make sure that we don't see other tariffs on other areas of trade, because that will not be good for Australian jobs or our economy. So we're not happy about this, and we want to make sure that the outcomes lead to Australia's interests being first, and this government will be judged on their outcomes, not on their calm and measured talking points.
So when it comes to, and I'll stay with you, Keith, here, so when you're talking about reciprocal tariffs, because that's what Donald Trump is doing, and now the Canadians are paying the price for that, if this turns out to be true, would you support reciprocal tariffs? And then I'll get Julian's response to that too.
I can't see a scenario where that will be in our interests. Australia is a prosperous and safe country because we are a trading nation. That has always been the case, and I can't see that being any different going forward. Our circumstances are different to Canada, which shares a border with the United States and has a different trade imbalance with the United States. So we have to take an Australian approach, and an Australian approach has to be in our interests. But this is also a point to make about diversification and our own industrial resilience. And those are lessons we have to learn from this as well.
Well, again, we had to do that with China. But Julian, just on that point of reciprocal tariffs, is that something you agree with there? Is this just something we're going to have to cop?
Can I just compliment Keith on that? That was the most adult exposition I've heard from the opposition on these issues, and you could coach your colleagues, but genuinely, I'd make 3 points. This is a very different situation, and I'd quote Ines Willox yesterday, the CEO of the Australian Industry Group. President Trump clearly has a very different and disruptive agenda on trade. I agree with Keith. I think we're on a unity ticket here. Australia's national interest is best served with an open trading regime, and our view of the global economy is served by an open trading regime. It is also a fact that when Australia last faced tariffs, as Ines Willox said, this is a very different situation to when Australia last faced tariffs from the US. It took months, not weeks, to secure an exemption. And the most important thing, frankly, in dealing with these things, given everyone has relationships with our US counterparts in Congress, different relationships in the administration, is that we work as Team Australia in the interests of Australian exporters, jobs and business to calmly and consistently put our case.
Okay, but final point here to you, Keith. Is it now getting towards a must that we get defence spending to 3% of GDP as per Donald Trump's wish?
I think going forward, we need to have a more resilient defence posture. That is clear. And we need to recognise where we're at the moment.
What does that mean? Is that higher spending?
I think it means a more capable defence force, and that usually leads to higher spending, but targeted spending. For example, we're almost 5,000 people short in the full-time defence force, and our defence force is about, things that fly, float and drive, but it's fundamentally a people business, and to be 5,000 short is not good enough. So at the moment, our defence force is sort of choked in red tape. We need to find a way to liberate our defence force, make sure that we spend the money that we have now better, and right now there's questions about that. And going forward, I think we need to lift our defence base, and that probably means much more spending.
Okay, so on that point, Julian, I mean, the UK, France, they're increasing their defence budgets because Donald Trump said so. China is upping its by 7% and intimidating us. In the meantime, have we got to make room for more spending in defence?
Well, we do, and we are. The government is spending more on defence than at any time in our history.
Towards 3%.
Let me finish, Pete. It's on an upwards trajectory of $50 billion over the next decade. I'd point out that the opposition, I was listening carefully to Keith's response then and seeing if we got a third position, because Jane Hume says, oh yeah, we'll spend 3%. Andrew Hastie, the Shadow Defence Minister, a couple of hours later said, oh no, that's not our policy. Dutton says there's $350 billion of secret cuts coming. So Keith seems to be saying something in between, so we'll give that 3.5 positions. They've been in opposition 3 years. They don't have any real defence policies except a squadron of F-35 fighter jets with no one to fly them and no petrol and no maintenance. I mean, it is a joke. So yes, the defence budget is on an upwards trajectory. That is absolutely necessary. We'll continue to review Australia's strategic circumstances, but we're not going to be lectured to by the mob that serially underfunded defence, kept announcing literally tens of billions of dollars of projects with no funding.
It's Trump asking you to do it to get to 3%. I mean,
and I'm making the point. It's a really important point, Pete, it's a really important point that Australia's defence spending is already on an upwards trajectory. And of course, when we look at global circumstances, when we hear from our biggest strategic partner, we take that on board. But you're not seriously expecting a government minister of a serious government to just start shooting our mouth off about defence expenditure on television. These things will be dealt with in an orderly and proper way in the budget. And I'll finish on this point. I was chair of the Defence Committee, and I think Keith should be on it, frankly, because he knows more than most of the bozos they put on there. But this is a serious strategic circumstance that we face. We inherited a total mess, and we're not going to go back to the bad old days of what Dutton and the Libs do, surround themselves with flags, make all these announcements, but never actually fund or deliver the capability.
I've got to go, but you need to respond to that, Keith. So you've got 30 seconds.
Well, I think we actually need to look at capability, and Julian didn't address the elephant in the room. We're short 5,000 people. That's 1 in 12. Imagine 12 people sitting around a table. One's missing.
I actually handed down a report on that, Keith.
Totally unacceptable.
I handed a report on that. There's a report I tabled saying exactly that. When the labour market's strong, defence recruitment's hard. That's a fact.
Blame the economy, okay.
Gents, we got to go.